Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today. It's such a pleasure to get to chat with you because of the fact that some of the music that you create is very iconic as far as uh, it sparks memory. It takes us back to a series, and right now I think that's how we're feeling with Daredevil Born Again. Um, let's talk about what was your approach for Daredevil Born Again, being that there was already a foundation before that with the Netflix series.
I think the initial sort of approach was like for Taylor and I to look at it as fans. We kind of started there, and then absorbing all of the material of this new series, sort of figuring out like where the old Daredevil musically fits in with the new. I shouldn't say old. There's not old, but like the original, the original theme fits in with like this incarnation of Daredevil, and it was sort of our realization, not our realization, but through the story that there was a story about Matt Murdock that needed to be told, that's being told, and that's sort of the jumping off point that we took to sort of our exploration to begin our exploration for who is Matt Murdock and how does that tie into who Daredevil is, and that sort of then we were able to use that same question for all the characters, right? Like who is Fisk, who's Kingpin, like who is Poindexter, who is Bullseye, and we kind of applied that throughout the season really, and that was sort of the jumping off point, and then it was like, okay, what are these now? It's just like let's get into the weeds and figure out like what the sound of these characters are. And Matt was the first character, and end up it's actually Taylor's voice you hear humming the sort of the Matt theme that sort of kicks off the main titles, I guess, if we're talking about a specific piece of music. So that was sort of the ground. I don't know, Taylor, if you want to launch into more about that.
I mean, yeah, we started off on these suites for specific characters, and Matt was one of the ones we needed to tackle, and he's really focused on this in this season. What he lost his best one of his best friends, and it's kind of about this internal struggle inside him, almost like a recovering alcoholic. I mean, isn't that what Dario had mentioned? The showrunner had mentioned to us, like, there's a scene where he was like, he doesn't want to fight anybody, he doesn't want to hurt anybody, but he's pushed to that limit, and now he has to. But it's the tragedy and sort of where does he want to go with this character? So we wanted something very, very minimal, very haunting, and that he sort of would be fighting amongst himself with and struggling. And then obviously we go into the beautiful Daredevil theme, and so that was sort of the approach with Matt.
So, and then just let's talk a little bit about the theme. I mean, John Paisano and Brandon Kimbrell did it for Netflix, and now we want to make sure that I think it's interesting to see how franchises sometimes evolve. We've seen that before with like Batman and Elfman bringing back the theme in Justice League, and then more recently they're going to be doing with the Donner sound. It kind of is part of their identity, and I think Daredevil, Matt Murdock has that same tone to him. So now in coming in with this a kind of new intro as they enter into Disney Plus, into the MCU, and into this chapter in his life that you're talking about. How do you approach the theme to kind of uh to refresh it, but at the same time to make sure that it keeps its identity?
I mean, I think as you said, as a fan of the original or any original series or movies where people have something that they like Star Wars or any Batman, often unless there's a complete reboot or reset, I think fans are hungry for the connection to that character. I know we are, and I love the theme that John wrote, and I think it's finding a way to um, how is that thing going to be utilized in this story? What are we trying to say and tell? And I think we really want to again get into again Matt Murdock and his personal struggles, And then as we go into Daredevil and as we sort of tease the theme or we play the theme, what do we want to bring focus on? And I think for us, we really wanted to bring focus on the sort of the Catholic elements and choir and organ, and that really is what connects to Matt, and Matt obviously is Daredevil. So I think it was about playing with those palettes throughout the show.
Yeah. And yeah, and then and really like that's the key word, like playing, like getting into the studio and just like, not getting into paralysis by analysis, right? Um, there's like we like to do a lot of homework up front, so maybe that's too much thinking, but then at a certain point there needs to be like, if you think you stink, it's like let's plug things in, just like no bad ideas, make noise, hit things, like play instruments, like try to like, come up like ideas, you know, that are sort of working for the character or the scene. And that's sort of where everything sort of begins and kind of ends, because that's after you get past that, it becomes like production and figuring out like how are you going to produce this track, but really the creativity comes down to like just letting go for a bit and not thinking too much and going with like the gut of like everything that like, or we think we know, right, about this character, and then taking, and that's why it's nice to have the two of us, because like we'll work on something and send it to the other one, and the other one will react to it like yes, no, awesome, cool, too dark, too happy, too sad, whatever, and it's a nice sort of like trial to go through in the early stages of putting ideas together.
Yeah, and it sounds great too. I mean, I've always been such an advocate for how much emotion it adds to a scene. I mean, we've seen scenes also without music and see how it's really lacking a ton of seasoning, a ton of character. I do want to ask you about your balance and kind of the elements that you use in your sounds. We have a Hell's Kitchen that's dark, gritty, kind of old world, classic. I don't so many synonyms I can use for it. And then we have, really the modern take of the character. Where is it you find your balance with kind of using, classical like orchestra type sounds versus modern, more electronic sounds to kind of blend the two together?
I mean, I think you just hit it right there. That's sort of what we love to do, is to combine those two things, because um, there's so much sonic room, and where maybe it's not going with a textural or some unique sound, you're going with a strong melody. So I think being able to decide and weave into those worlds is where we really love to play. And this show really allowed us to do that. Bring in some more traditional stuff with the choir and the hymns that were written, to using cellos that are pitching out of tune with effects to sort of indicate that Matt is sensing something is about to go down. um, I think playing in that world is where we love to do, and we started off with these ideas, and we just kind of kept refining them, and some of them were a little too crazy. But that's the fun of it. In the beginning, you're experimenting and playing, and even when we got to the orchestra stage with the orchestra, we were even driving them crazy with what we wanted to do, and it was very non-traditional in that sense, but it yielded really really fun and unique results, and I think that's what we were after, and we had a great time doing it.
Yeah, we do have one character that is completely traditional in sound, and that's by design, and that's Vanessa. Everything for Vanessa is wholly organic. Uh, yeah, that's all I'll say about it right now. That's all.
It's
Yeah,
funny, but yeah, once you brought that up, I was like, it's probably Vanessa,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that would totally make sense. How do you approach Daredevil is really well known for its amazing fight sequences. Sometimes where the uh I guess the main sound that you're hearing are the punches, are the grunts, are um the big swings. As a composer, how do you approach scenes like that to add some sort of undertoning sounds to it, but you still want to make sure that it complements all of the hits that are going through it.
I think our sort of initial approach and the approach of the Marvel team was to be minimal on the music front, which I think 90% of the time we agree with, and we fully agreed with it for this show, um, because it really allows you to feel sort of all of the textures of the fight and what's really happening, as opposed to just like driving through it like, oh, this is another fight. You're really feeling like every little bit of these fights, and they're scrappy. They're like, and I think that that's what makes it like feel aggressive. It's I mean, I hate fighting, but I grew up playing hockey, so I ended up in fights. Just like, not, I'm not a mean person at all, but like that's just, it just happens sometimes. You lose it, it happens. And I know like not once did were those fights like something that's like sexy and fun and exciting. Like, which is usually sort of what's done, right? Like, oh, this is exciting. Dun, 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 fight. This is exciting. That's not how it feels. Like, it hurts. Like, it hurts to get hit, to hit. Like, your hand hurts. Taylor took like real like intense karate for a long time. So, I mean, and that was sort of our intention with the score of staying out of the way. Like, let's let these fights just be what they are. And episode 2 has come out, so like everyone is seeing like how that fight at the end feels so raw, and the music literally just goes out at a certain point, and it's just like you're left with what's happening in that room, and it feels very visceral. So that was fun to do.
I think it differs from characters to characters, and obviously scenes to scene. Sometimes it gets, it needs to get sadistic and dark for certain reasons, and other times it really doesn't need to be needed at all. So I think it's finding moments to weave in and out where we want to go big and go small. So I think it's always a fun canvas to paint on.
One of the things I was most excited to ask you guys about is how do you create an eerie atmosphere? You guys do a very good job at doing it here in Daredevil Born Again, but you are no strangers to doing things like that in like Midnight Mass, Haunting of Hill House, and things like that. What are some of the keys to creating eerie atmospheres in music to kind of tense us up as audience members?
I think it's sort of the tension of the unknown of what's going to come. I think it's the void of what the music should is being comforting and telling you what to feel is real fun to play with a specific character in this series, and we were able to really tap into the sort of sadisticness of this character, and we use some unconventional instruments. So I think for those scenes, it's less is more until until it's not. But
Yeah.
that was sort of our approach, and we took those sequences like we take a lot of the other lot of the shows you were mentioning we do with Mike, like Midnight Mass and Haunting is is sometimes when you don't know what's going to happen, that is the most scariest thing in the world, because the music isn't telling you what's coming, it's not telling you what to feel, it's just telling you something is off. And I think that is what's incredibly disturbing.
Yeah, and we're usually pretty good about sort of chatting about like, I think the key to like things feeling like the key, I think, to things actually being impactful in silence or in a drone or in a weird, just a single weird sound, is some of it is in the sound, but a lot of it is in the approach to like what's happening before and what's happening after, and not even around that scene. Sometimes it's about like what's happening 5 scenes earlier and how are you going to tee up how that works later. It's very manipulative by design, but it has to be so that it can be very effective. Otherwise, it ends up being like it's just like a sound that's just like holding a tone throughout. And that can be effective too. But even with that, you need to be very sort of precise with like where you start and where you stop, because the difference of those scenarios can be the difference between like this being effective and this just being like, oh, this is just drony noise in the background. Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned that just because I've had the great opportunity to talk to a variety of different composers as of late, which has been amazing. Uh, but you guys leave Easter eggs through your entire work, whether it's in a feature film or it's in a series. That that opening theme that we hear, or the opening credits, a lot of times plays such a role throughout the film or series, and people don't necessarily realize it. What are some unique things that people should not look out for, but listen into a little bit closer as they watch Daredevil?
I think obviously the intro is a good one you mentioned because there's the Matt theme, the humming that happens in different instrumentation, different arrangements, and ways this playing where he's sort of just like thinking to himself like, oh fuck, or or what this situation I'm in that is brutal. And then I think also there's other things with Vanessa, that sort of little hints of things that happen that sort of as you watch you can listen for that you'll know what's coming in terms of her character, that gives you little tastes and teases of things, I think. And there's a couple other characters too we won't mention just yet, but they're very subtle touches that you can hear that they're lurking around.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting even like, we talk a lot about like the difference between the two sides of the characters, like, the Matt Murdock and the Daredevil, the Mayor Fisk versus Kingpin, etc. But even within that, there's like the Fisk and Vanessa, like the relationship between the two of them, right? And how we sort of see even in the first two episodes, like how that has affected each of them, And I think that like
Yeah.
it's yeah, it's really just awesome how like so many like micro details of the story are are mirrored, right? Just even with what we're just discussing, and even just the first two episodes, there's all this mirroring going on, that does exist in real life, and I guess seems so obvious, so we don't go share guacamole with friends and talk about the mirroring of the day, but like
I'm not doing
perhaps we should. I don't know. Yeah,
Though,
that's fair.
with a couple of episodes already out, I think, well, as we're recording this tonight, there's a new one, and I'm very excited for it. Um, what was your guys' approach when you first saw what was going to be happening, especially with Foggy's character, and how you guys were going to approach to doing music for that? Because I mean, it was gonna impact everybody watching it. It was gonna set the tone for the series, and also we were gonna have to say goodbye to a beloved character.
Yeah, I think, obviously anything that you do that's super impactful is very controversial. You know what I mean? Like in terms of they're like, oh my God, what's happening? But when I initially saw it, I was like, oh wow. And then as you sort of see where it's going, it defines also like why Matt lost his best friend. This anyone who loses someone they love that close to them, it's going to cause something inside them to shift for better or for worse. And you see that sort of pain inside Matt, and I feel like that is the impetus for this driving through the show is sort of what has happened. And it's very grounded and it's very real and tragic. So I think once you understand that element of it, you're not just like, oh my God, you obviously you miss you miss Foggy, he's great, but I think it helps with that, at least relate to that tragedy more, so you're not, so upset on that.
Yeah, and it kind of unlocked like for us the whole like purpose of like kicking off the season that way, right? Like there was a moment where it was like, oh, like even in how we're scoring this moment with them on top of the building, um, and Foggy actually dying, it was like this is the whole,
Yeah.
this is what's happening. Like this is the impetus for things to come, like and I think it's really interesting. I think I heard Dario and Sana talking about this in an interview, and I know they mentioned it to us when we were sort of working on this, just about like you need to have something that's like very weighted in order for it to be real, right? So it's not just like, oh, like he had a bad day, so he decided to like, on his to-do list for tomorrow, he's gonna like start a new chapter, It's more like, oh man, like this is some life-shaking event that like makes you really, you are gonna change who you are, sort of vibe.
The stakes are high.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, dude, yeah, it's a great moment because I mean, not great because he dies, but
He's
it's great.
gone.
It's a great moment because for the longest time, I know a lot of fans are like, yeah, there hasn't been that many stakes, and then immediately this at the beginning of this, it's like, yep, here you go. Here's the stakes that you wanted, and everybody went, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Yeah. What was your reaction, Manny? Like what was your like honest like reaction when you were watching it? Were you just like, "Wait, what?"
So my honest reaction is I thought it was like either a dreamscape or a
I heard, yeah,
or just yeah, a dream kind of a false memory, some daydream. Uh, and then I watched it, and I think I got I don't remember how far further I got, and I said, "Wait a minute, no, this did not just happen." I went all the way back, restarted the episode, and then sat there very seriously in front of my television, and I went, "Oh, yeah, it did happen. This is what we were asking for, but I did not expect that in the first 15 minutes of episode."
I
So
love that, man. That's
that's
great.
yeah. The stakes are high. I mean, even at the end of the episode, White Tiger, that was just like, woo.
yeah, that last week's episode, where he's in court and then that all gets resolved. Um, and then the ending of it, it was a lot. It
Yeah,
emotionally charged, but that's what we wanted, and I think that in no offense to some of the other series, but that's what we've been missing is that really gritty, dark Hell's Kitchen tone that we got in Daredevil, that we explored in Luke Cage and things like that. So here we are, and
we
I'm
are.
glad that you two gentlemen have been a part of it, because I think you've nailed it as far as composing is going, and I love the new version of the opening theme. So thank you so much for spending a few minutes with me. It means a lot to get to talk
No,
to you.
thank you, man.
Yeah, no, thank you, Manny. We really appreciate it.